Hi, my name is Dr. John Francis. I want to welcome you to the 14th Star Tide Virtual Tech Demo. I'm coming to you from West Cape, May, New Jersey, where as a commissioner and elected official, I serve as our community's police, court, volunteer, fire department, administrator. But today I'd like to talk to you about lessons from Strong Angel 3, an international disaster response demo, and the need for ethical oversight. To begin, I'd like to speak a little bit about the journey that brought me here. It began in 1971 when I witnessed an oil spill in California, San Francisco. I gave up riding in motorized vehicles because I wanted to take some responsibility for the pollution, the oil that was washing upon the shore. And I just started walking. Um, Now, it wasn't long after I had began walking that my friends and neighbors started arguing with me. I realized it takes two to argue. And so I argued with my friends and my neighbors about whether one person could make a difference if they uh, just walked. And I really wasn't sure I knew what I was talking about. And I was um, tired of all the arguments I was having. So I gave up speaking on my 27th birthday for one day and realized that I had not been listening, and that um, because I had not been listening, I had stopped learning. And so I decided that I wouldn't speak for another day and for a year. And pretty soon it was 17 years I had passed before I started speaking again. Uh, and I During that time, though, I have to say I learned a lot. I listened to a lot of people. I walked and explored Northern California and Oregon wilderness. And when I came out of the Southern Oregon wilderness, the Kalmiopsis wilderness, I went to school at Southern Oregon State College and graduated with a lifetime goal to sail and walk around the planet as part of my education, with the spirit of hope that in some way I might help others and contribute to the benefit of the world. Now, uh, I I apprenticed as a wooden boat builder, and then I left on my walk first to Port Townsend, Washington, where I built a boat and rowed it across Puget Sound and sold the boat, and continued walking on to Montana, where I had applied for a master's program in environmental studies. I arrived there 2 years later, and after I had made application, and it was quite a long walk, and I was given uh, a scholarship actually to attend the university, and I received my master's degree, and then continued on to South Dakota, where I worked as a printer for a few years, for actually just for the winter, and then went on to Madison, Wisconsin, where I attended the University of Wisconsin, the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, for my PhD. In 1989, I finished my final exams, writing on oil spills, which was why I had stopped walking. And it was right after that that uh, Exxon Valdez happened. And it turned out I was the only uh, person at that level writing on oil spills in the United States, and was already getting published. So that uh, when I reached the East Coast, uh, I started speaking on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. because I realized that I had something to say. And what it was about the environment, that people were part of the environment. And while we looked at pollution and loss of species and habitat as environmental problems, I realized that how we treated each other was also an environmental problem, because how we treated one another was going to manifest in the physical environment around us. And so human rights and civil rights and gender equality and economic equity and all the ways that we relate to each other um, are part of the environment. And that's things that we have to address if we're going to really deal with the environment holistically. And so I was hired by the Coast Guard, and I ended up writing environmental regulations. I was hired by the Oil Pollution Act of 1990 staff in Washington, D.C. I worked uh, as an environmental analyst and project manager. And after that, I continued on a sailboat through the Caribbean and to South America, walking the length of South America. And then in returning in 2005 and 2006, I had the good fortune of meeting Dr. Lin, and I began developing the role of an ethical advisor for Strong Angel 2 and 3. They were international disaster response demonstrations, one held in Hawaii in temporary shelters on a lava field, and the other in California at the San Diego Fire Training Academy. Now, during the demonstration week, there were roughly 800 participants and more than 200 organizations, which included the US Department of Defense and NATO and the UN and numerous tech companies, including Microsoft, Google, and Cisco Systems, Sprint Nextel, and many others. A working laboratory. Participants, observers, local volunteers came together. The purpose of the demonstration was to develop the development of a laboratory for experimenting cutting-edge techniques and technologies to facilitate improved cooperation and information flow across the civil-military boundary and post-disaster and post-conflict field environments. Strong Angel team, a group of medical, military, humanitarian, and technology experts, encouraged participants to explore the development of technical and social tools. Those tools were designed specifically to address roughly 50 real-world challenges that support principles of community resilience and effective cooperation in response to complex emergencies. Strong Angels team chose the scenario of a lethal pandemic coupled with a cyber terrorist attack to provide an adverse context designed to stimulate learning, sharing, and experimentation. Oh my, seems like that's happening right now. But as I mentioned, the teams from the private and public sectors, including engineers, UN staff, humanitarian NGO workers, academic researchers, journalists, active duty military, policymakers, and others formed a working laboratory for disaster response innovation. Like the two previous demonstrations, Strong Angel 3 stressed the principles of inclusion, cooperative response integration, effective resource management, civil military collaboration, and most importantly, creative synthesis. The immediate goal after starting the demonstration was the development of a set of principles that would facilitate civil military self-organization in future events. The overarching goal was to promote the development of tools and techniques for establishing a robust and resilient community response capability for both natural and man-made disasters. The design of the week drew from field experience of many agencies and entities with deep successful experience in austere environments. Providing ethical oversight, I dedicated myself with others to assess the ethical aspects of objectives and the associated experiments. For example, the ethics of leave behinds and their long-term implications. Strong Angel 3 stressed the need to leave behind technologies, equipments, and solutions to help address the needs of communities in San Diego. But because the central scenario was largely a first world pandemic, considerations of the ethics of leave behinds and technologies to alien frameworks were not really fully discussed. But if you want to get a good handle on something like that, please check out John Waterhouse's presentation on his medical efforts in the South Sudan. But some of the questions that we had to ask each other, and uh, particularly some of the participants, were what are the ethics of leaving behind a framework of dependency on particular technologies that may not be sustainable in the long term? What are the commitments to long-term training of staff? Does the spirit of collaboration and interoperability, that lasts in the first part of the response, guarantee long-term systems that continue to share information based on open standards in the affected region? What are the social, political, and cultural implications of leaving behind technologies? How does one even map the consequences? How does one reconcile the expectations of the community and what is really left behind? What are the ethics involved in branding of leave behinds? How does one ensure that such branding does not undermine the development of local expertise and technology? Well, do leave behinds require high maintenance? If so, how are the associated costs going to be met? What are the ways through which the potential use of leave behinds and the continued commitment to a region can be communicated to affected communities, their governments, that prevent the growth of negative perceptions? And most of the gear that at Strong Angel 3 was tremendously expensive. And on the open market, it was noted that more than $35 million worth of equipment was present and used, which was more than the combined budget of many in-country aid agencies and peace support NGOs in the developing countries. Finally, I want to touch on corporate branding versus humanitarianism, the imperative of sensitive aid delivery. I mean, it's grossly tactless to belabor the merits of a certain system and use it in the field for short-term visibility, commercial capitalism, and marketing purposes in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. The trauma, the loss of life associated with large-scale disasters cannot be the foundation or the bedrock for marketing campaign. Humanitarian aid is emphatically not about commercial branding. At the same time, As one participant expressed at Strong Angel 3 debriefing, many commercial companies offer their services in support of disaster relief and aid precisely because it offers an opportunity to market their products directly to the governments, to civil society, to countries affected by the disaster, but also to those affected areas by those not affected in those areas by writing case studies that almost inevitably posit the product as the single most important link in the aid chain. Now, as the ethical advisor, I spent the days at Strong Angel trying to remind participants of their focus on affected populations and offering, only when requested, advice on right action and of leaving the idea of competition behind when part of a coordinated disaster response. I have to say that at some of the debriefings, I felt that that no one really asked me any questions. There were a few people came and asked me some things about um, some arguments they were having with other participants and volunteers, and uh, but mostly I realized that they told me later that they had internalized the idea of a ethical advisor, and they asked themselves many times, what would our ethical advisors say when they came upon a situation where they thought they needed some advice? Um, and I thought that was very interesting, but that how important an ethical advisor is. And I'd like to say that the final Strong Angel report stated, and I quote, "There are, to our knowledge, no other events where an ethical advisor is a core part of the demonstration, ensuring that political, corporate, personal, and religious agendas are put aside in the interest of cooperation and a larger goal. We recommend such advisors be used more frequently and that attention be given to them and what they say," end quote. And given our situation today, I believe these findings are most timely. So thank you very much.